Let's talk about gardening as an occupation and creating sensational spaces for children and people with disabilities. There was a study, It's Gardening as an Occupation, a Critical Review. The researchers looked at gardening as a beneficial occupation. They thought about how to harness personal and social agents of change and promoting community collaboration. What they found was that participants were able to harness personal and social agents of change, and it promoted community collaboration. What are the implications for practice in occupational therapy? This study sought to inform practice within the context of gardening as an occupation and has identified 3 areas in which there are implications for practice. 1. Gardening is a beneficial occupation. Number 2. Harness the personal and social agents of change. 3. Occupational therapists should collaborate with organizations operating within the voluntary and community sector in order to use their unique services to help others. Further research is needed to explore gardening and well-being. 1. Gardening is a beneficial occupation, which is established through evidence that the natural environment, use of gardening activities, social groups, opportunities to redefine personal identity and roles through nurturing processes, and skill development increase well-being. Despite this, activity analysis and grading and accessibility of the environment remain as considerations. Number 2. Professionals working within a gardening setting are able to harness the personal and social agents of change and to work to establish and maintain links to the wider community. This promotes social inclusion and the push towards community development as a determinant of health. 3. Occupational therapists should collaborate with organizations operating within the voluntary and community sector in order to use their unique services to help others. Further research is needed to explore gardening and well-being. This will include a focus on recovery and psychosocial interactions, and also the individual and wider levels of participation, and see how that affects the person and their well-being. In the conclusion of this study, the researchers found that there was increased well-being, increased connection, increased physical activity, increased competency, increased experiential learning, increased meaningfulness, and increased social inclusion. The conclusion of this study found that the occupation of gardening in the natural environment was shown to increase well-being amongst the individuals in the study. Being in the outdoors offered a calming, neutral, destigmatized platform where people felt connected to something real. Physical activity while engaging in gardening increased the physical health and fitness with positive effects on mental health. The environment and occupational form created the genesis of a new self, configured through demonstrated competency within garden tasks, and the act of nurturing the environment and the other people in the group. This sense of personal agency operated within the same dimension as a recovery approach. Physical skills were relearned or maintained in ways that offered satisfaction and personal meaning to the participants. A process of a social agent of change was identified in the study in how people influenced and shaped their wider communities. People were making a difference in doing something bigger on a societal level by caring for the plant, providing examples of successful, sustainable practices for garden projects, and for future collaboration of services, promoting social inclusion and integration for people who are marginalized. Create an accessible garden for those with physical limitations. We want to think about gardening for the mind, gardening for the body, and gardening for the soul. Gardens bring so many benefits to youth and adults alike. They supply fresh fruits and vegetables, clean our air, connect us to the natural world, provide endless opportunities for learning and inspiration, offer a quiet spot to take a break from our electronics-filled world, and so much more. For individuals with challenged mobility, gardening opportunities may at first appear limited. However, by designing your garden with accessibility in mind, you can create a garden that can be enjoyed by everyone. Gardening, occupation as ends. In occupation as ends, that would be preparing for the occupation of gardening. The outcome of the intervention or goal is the ability to perform or engage in occupation. but does not necessarily mean the use of the occupation was used directly as an intervention. For example, let's say a client has a goal to begin gardening or to return to gardening. Occupation as ends is preparing for the occupation of gardening. Someone might have to perform exercises to increase their balance, to increase their sitting tolerance, to increase their functional activity tolerance. They might not be able to get up and down off the floor easily. That could include motivation or learning new skills. Improving the functional skills to perform gardening tasks. So that could be habilitation or rehabilitation exercises. It also includes preparing for garden tool use. Cognitive skills, balance, grip. It also includes continued skill development. Anything that is preparing for the occupation of gardening. Gardening, occupation as means. Occupation as means is using the engagement or performance of an occupation as the intervention. That will be the focus of this presentation. We will be talking a lot about garden task performance and what the design and planning of a garden should look like. Creating sensational spaces. Universal design. What are the wants and needs of the person you're making a garden for? What are their key needs? What are the issues, concerns, their ideas or personal style? And then what's the plant palette? These are all things that we need to discover before we go along this process in designing the garden. First, let's think about universal design. A barrier-free enabling garden can be as simple as an easily accessible window box hung from a balcony railing at waist height, or an entire home landscape designed to be accessible and maintained by a person who uses a wheelchair. Universal design. 7 principles of universal design. Then there are the ADA standards for accessible design. I have put the links here for you to follow them if you want to see the documents. These are things that one should consider as they are designing a garden. There are 7 principles of universal design. Principle 1 is about equitable use. Principle 2 is about flexibility in use. Principle 3 is simple and intuitive use. Principle 4 is about perceptible information. Principle 5 is about tolerance for error. Principle 6 is about low physical effort. And Principle 7 is about size and space for approach and use.